How's it going, everybody? So welcome to episode 5 of the BlenderNest podcast. We've been doing this for a month now, guys. A whole month. We got this far. Let's get to 10. About the Patreon, we have 5 people on it now. It's awesome. Now we can get this on platforms like Apple Music, Spotify. If you guys want to support the podcast and get on board and have a good time with this and help us out, head on into the Patreon. That'd be awesome. So Blender 2.82 is now out. And some really cool stuff is on there. What are some of y'all's favorite things that got released in this new update?
Definitely the cloth. I've been really looking forward to cloth improvements because I've used Marvelous Designer quite a lot in the past, especially for doing hard surface type stuff. And Blender was always lacking in that field, but now finally got some extra features. But actually, I really enjoyed watching Southern Shotty's video breaking down some of the new features as well.
Thank you. I wonder too, with the new cloth and mana flow, I wonder if they're kind of getting set up for everything nodes, because I also heard rumor that they were fixing up the particles, and then I know that everything nodes is coming. I know they hired that developer, so I kind of wonder if they're trying to like bolster it to have some kind of almost like a Houdini light, you know what I mean, where you can like kind of control all these things through nodes. I'm curious if that's one of their goals. You know, who knows? It's open source, so it's whatever's tossed at them.
Yeah, what are some of the specifics in the cloth simulation that are much better for that? We'll go with Grant.
I don't know much about the cloth simulation.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say Grant. I meant to say
the other guy from the UK.
The other one.
Well, actually, I don't think I'm that qualified to talk about the specifics about this because I've only seen the improvements from secondhand effects of it, and I don't actually know any of the technicalities in terms of the names of the features. But I just know that one of the things I really had trouble with beforehand was getting things to inflate with pressure, so the cloth actually stretches from its original form. So say, for example, if you were doing zero gravity type stuff and you had like a closed cloth system, for example, if you had like tubing and you wanted to have like some wavy cloth around it, but the cloth would be closed around the tubing. One thing that you really wanted to do in that case was have the cloth stretch away from its original shape in certain areas, but then like sort of collapse in other areas to get the proper wavy effect. And that was really difficult to do beforehand, but now it's easier. So that's what I know from these improvements. But unfortunately, I'm not that versed in cloth simulation, so I can't talk too much about it.
Do you know how people used to do it back in the day to like make that kind of thing? Because I know Blender Guru said back in the day it was like the hardest thing ever.
It was.
Yeah, all I know is before this, I would always do it in Marvelous Designer, and they had just like a couple of sliders just specifically for this whole stretching thing. And because it was all so fast and in real time, you would move the slider up and just watch it all like turn baggy, and it was really satisfying as well, especially with gravity turned off, and it looked really cool. So I was always waiting for something like that to just come to Blender, so I would not have to go into separate software for it.
Yeah, I used Ncloth and Maya a lot, and before then Cyflex, and it wasn't as streamlined as it is today. So what I'm really excited about too are these internal springs that I'm seeing written about, and I really want to go and test it out and play with it because it looks, if it's anything, what I'm thinking is like a FEM simulation in Houdini. Even if it's sort of like that, I'm really excited because it means that you can hold the volume as you're compressing. So you're getting actually like a squishy soft body type effect, but using cloth, which will solve probably much faster and better. And I'm hoping that that's the case. So I'm going to play with it hopefully today.
One thing I've always wondered, whenever I've done any kind of cloth thing in Blender, it gets really high poly really quickly, and then it starts to lag. Does Marvelous handle topology differently? Because I've seen the demos where they're like pulling the cloth and letting go of it, and it's like nice and smooth. Is it just because they had a bigger computer, or do they handle that kind of topology differly?
I've used Marvelous. Sorry.
I was just going to say, Marvelous Designer is very optimized for this, but it's all calculated in triangles. But they have settings where it's consistent across the entire mesh. So, with Blender, the cloth simulation reacts to the topology that you've provided it. So you could have some areas where there's like a higher density of geometry and some areas where there's less. With Marvelous, you tend to work with a consistent quality, which I think also helps with the solver as well. We'll see. Again, I'm not too versed in the technical side of it.
What else has come out in Blender 2.82 since this release?
I'm quite excited about the sculpting workflow and the improvements there. It's been amazing since 2.8 anyway, but for 2.82 they every episode release they keep just improving it, and there's there's some cool stuff that I really want to play with.
Is the cloth brush implemented yet, or is that a 2.83?
That's the next version. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the UDIMS, the multi-plane texturing. So you can actually have different resolution textures for different parts of the model, which is a super time saver. So like for faces, you could have like super detailed areas, and then like fall off to other parts of the body that are less detailed. And it's looking. I haven't tested the implementation yet, but it looks really, really cool. It's something I'm pretty excited about for texturing.
Yeah, what they seem to be doing is trying to get with the rest of the industry, don't they? With things like UDIMS and stuff. So that's really exciting, I think, because we're going to see, again, more people joining the Blender train, and we're going to get more creators and therefore more funding and so forth. So it's just, things like the UDIMS especially, it's fantastic.
They added, on that note, they added the USD too from Pixar, Universal Scene Descriptions, which is like a way to kind of like share your entire scene so that you can cross over to other applications. On that note, that makes it more kind of industry friendly. They're kind of adding a couple features like that, like with UDIMS and USDs. And I know they started working on FBX import options, because there's a couple options in their work they're kind of doing that, which will make it more friendly with other applications. Also, Unreal Engine just added support for Blender in Datasmith. So now you can like install Datasmith add-on and just send your files directly to Unreal Engine. Of course, with anything, there's like some limitations, but I mean, that's pretty crazy that it's kind of starting to get that implementation now. And I've noticed that in the Blender community, a lot of people really want to stay only in Blender, but for it to like truly succeed as a professional tool, it has to play well with other software. And for a lot of the people that are using Blender professionally in the industry, like all these features and things are really exciting.
I saw you mention something in your video about some more Alembic stuff. As far as I know, Alembic has to do with particle systems when I deal with them, but I'm not totally versed in like what Alembic even is.
Yeah, so Alembic was made by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, the people who do Star Wars, who don't know. They made this system so that they could kind of like export their scenes because, for example, like cloth simulations and other things like that, like if you export like an FBX, you can export, like a character object or like a cube or whatever, and you can take it into something else. But once you start getting into things like simulations and it uses like point cache data, I don't know all the technical things behind it. I know some of the terminology, and I know that it uses like point cache data so that like when you export your scene, you can actually bring over all those things. So for example, I gave my friend some of my scenes to render in Redshift to submit to the Redshift demo reel. And we were trying all these formats and we just couldn't get everything over because, I have all those shaders and all those diffuse deformations and all those different things going on like in my little stop motion scenes. And I exported as like a Alembic, and it just like pulled everything over, even like the displacement modifier maps and their animation, like it took everything over. So
wow.
Yeah, and I recorded that features video a couple weeks ago, and so I'm trying to remember all the little technical details. I just know that they added improved support. I don't know if they've done everything they want, but I know that all those import and export options, that's kind of like one of their focus right now is kind of cleaning those up and making those better and things like that, which is great because I was working on a project where somebody else was using like Cinema 4D or Maya, I can't remember, and like we were trying to import their camera into my scene, and I think because of the Z up, it was like flipping the camera backwards, and like we were going into the graph editor and trying to get it to like flip back, and we were like playing with the import options and trying to get it to flip, and we just like could not get it to come over. I think we ended up going to like an Alembic format, and then it worked. So
yeah, Alembic is proving to be super powerful. I'm seeing like I had to pick up the indie version of Houdini and try to port entire Houdini simulations into like Blender so I can render it with Cycles or Eevee, and it's like phenomenal. It's a godsend. I'm loving it.
I saw they're going to have some they just started support for viewport denoising and Cycles, which is super
optics.
cool.
Oh, I saw that
with optics. That's going to be awesome for people who have the optics features.
Yeah.
Which I think in the future it'll be more and more affordable. And having viewport denoising, especially, I do a lot of like foggy scenes and things like that. Man, that would be amazing to have. And it occurred to me that if Cycles keeps improving more viewport features that were used to be in the compositor, like bloom. If we can have that bloom that we get in Eevee in Cycles, it can really start to compete with Octane, which would be amazing. Because for guys like me who love that Octane look and that Octane speed, having that in a free open source program, that's powerful. That's super cool for Blender. And the fact that they're like developing it more and more, they have some incredible people at the Blender Institute. It's super cool.
Yeah, I mimic a lot of those looks in the compositor or in After Effects after the fact. But as an example of the power of optics and RTX and all these implementations of the new 2.82 kind of features and things like that. So yesterday I was working on a tutorial and I'd started it in 2.81 and I went to like set up the render, and it's a longer video. Is going to be like 1400 frames or about 1500 frames, and there was a lot of characters in the scene, so it was taking about a minute and a half to 2 minutes to render. And I have like a little render calculator, and it was telling me that it was going to take me 45 and a half hours to render the entire project. And I don't know why, but optics rendering would not work for me in 2.81. Like, it just wouldn't work. I upgraded to 2.82 and I installed the new NVIDIA drivers, and like suddenly optics worked. I don't know why it worked for me after that, but it did. That reduced my render time down from 45 and a half hours to 33 and a half hours. And also another contributing factor is that previously the CG Geek did this video where he talked about how Linux is much faster to render, because in the BVH loading time before your render starts, Windows takes forever to load everything in the scene. And he talked about kind of some of the technical aspects of that if you want to check out his video. But they fixed that in 2.82, which is kind of something that most people don't know. So now like your BVH will load almost like 200% faster. Like, it's just a lot faster. So that sped it up, plus the optics. So that cut it down to 33 hours. And then I used AI denoising, and then I just kind of optimized my scene a bit, and I got it down to 3.5 hours of render time.
Whoa.
From 45. Now, would it hold up on a screen? No. Would I send that quality of video with the denoising to a client? No. But like for social media compression, doesn't matter. Like, you can't see it because Instagram compresses it so much and YouTube compresses it so much that like by the time it's up, it was going to look that way anyway. So
even that's just good to send clients demos.
Yeah, exactly. And
awesome.
That was at like full 1080 resolution. I know you could lower that even more and pass it off to client as your rough. So
wow, yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, the BVH load time, for people who don't know in the community, BVH is like bounding volume height, and what it does is before you render a scene, I'm sure you guys know, I'm explaining it for the people in the comments who may not know. What it does is it goes through the scene and it kind of creates these boxes around like all your objects and things in the scene, and it's kind of using that to kind of calculate like where it's going to bounce all these ray traces. And so it takes a while to load that. So, you know, like when you hit F12 to render, and then it just like, it's a blank screen for like a minute and a half when you have a big scene, and then it just all of a sudden your image finally starts rendering. It's kind of that loading scene. That's also where a lot of people run out of RAM on their GPU or their computer. So that's been optimized to be a lot better. I don't think it changed the consumption in RAM or anything. So if your computer was having RAM issues, I don't think it's going to help you there, but it loads way faster. I mean, before I went to optics and I just went from 2.81 to 2.82 with the BVH loading time, it had already cut my render down from like a minute 45 to like a minute 27, which doesn't sound like much, but like I said, over 1500 frames, that was several hours, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like running a marathon in like some shoes that make you go just like 2% faster.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Talking about the viewport denoising, I really want that. Because I've just done a scene recently for the next video coming out. It's like a sci-fi corridor thing.
Oh, cool.
But almost all the lighting in that comes from emissive materials on objects going all the way down the corridor. So it's a lot of bounce lighting. And then there's other emissive elements that are like smaller and coming through glass. And then there's volume as well. So like the first moments where it's like trying to do the first, samples, it just looks like nothing.
Oh, yeah.
But then it starts to make sense. But I just spent ages staring at it, going, "Oh god, if only it would sort itself out a bit better."
Do you have optics on your computer?
I do, yeah. But actually, I haven't really played around too much with denoising features.
Well, yeah, if you have optics enabled, it cuts that noise out in like your volume really fast, especially when you hit the render button. It's incredible how fast I remember when I first got my 2 RTX cards, I completely forgot about optics. So I was just running on the CUDA and then I was just watching this thing render. And then it occurred to me, I was like, oh, optics. So I stopped the render, turned it on, pressed render again. It like, I was blown away. This technology is crazy.
So for people in the comments who don't know what optics are, NVIDIA released these new video cards and they have an extra set of processors on them called RTX cores. And those RTX cores allow them to kind of do extra processing, and developers have to tap into that. So you'll see it in games a lot, which is what it was made for, so that the games will get real-time ray tracing, which is the type of lighting that Cycles does. So that's why games are starting to look so much better on those new cards. They introduced it in their 20 series, so 2080, 2070, 2060, and all those. And then they came up with the Super series where they kind of improved it. And now they're working on the 3000 series, and the 3000 series so far, we'll see how the results come, but they're like saying that it's going to be twice as fast because they've optimized it so much that it's now much faster than before. Now, for people who can't afford video cards, that means that now optics is going to have 3 generations, meaning that suddenly that first generation before Super is going to be much cheaper, and having RTX enabled in Blender Cycles will help speed up your scenes quite a bit. So something worth keeping an eye out on. I don't mean to keep hijacking and explaining it, but I don't know that everybody would know the details of that.
That's tremendous value. Thanks. That actually adds a lot.
Yeah, I've got an RTX 2080 Ti, and I just hope it doesn't become redundant too quickly.
Yeah, I know. I kind of wish I'd have waited for the 3000 because it sounds like I adopted it early, and then they were like, "Oh, we figured it out now." And I'd imagine after that there won't be many more jumps for like, because it goes in like 5 to 10 year cycles. I'd imagine they're probably optimized now. So I'm like, crap, I should have waited, but whatever.
Yeah, I'll probably have to sell my 2 2080s at some point to do that. But yeah, I had just bought them because I do tutorials. I just wanted better viewport rendering times, because if I'm trying to make a tutorial in a scene that has volumetrics and cycles, the viewer is going to have trouble enjoying what that's supposed to look like. So I'm happy about this RTX technology. It's really incredible, just for even guys, for us, we're trying to record our screen and doing that. Let's see what happens with laptop technology, see how fast they can get those, and maybe get better batteries.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't go anywhere with my laptop without having my charger. I've gone to coffee shops, sat down, and I was like, oh, I forgot my charger. I was there for like an hour or less, had to go. It's like, we need some better battery technology. We'll see what Elon Musk does.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing I didn't like in Blender 2.82 was if you go, if you're in edit mode and you select a face and you want to inset it, most of the time you'd click inset and you just click the mouse and do it. But now, from what maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it has that yellow bar that you have to move. You have to click it. That's super annoying. I don't like that new UI feature. I liked it the way it was, because you could just click anywhere.
Yeah, if you just press I, it operates like it did before. Yeah.
Yeah, that new feature is not my favorite. But yeah, I should probably just click I. But
yeah, if you click I, for the most part, do the gizmos. Like if you use the shortcuts, it doesn't do gizmos.
But overall, Blender 2.8 in general, the UI is so much better. Like, it took how long did it take you guys to get used to the new UI?
Probably a couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah,
or a few weeks, because the muscle memory with 2.79 was just so embedded. But also, I never used pie menus or anything like that with 2.79. Then I started using them with 2.8, and I actually use machine tools by Machine. The developer, he does like Decal Machine and Mesh Machine add-ons. Yeah, I use Machine tools because he's got some extra features which extend the pie menus and stuff, which I really like. So I use them on top of Blender 2.8 version defaults. But now I've got that sort of hard-coded in the muscle memory. It's just a much smoother experience than previous versions of Blender.
I wonder, because I want to hear Blender Ben's opinion on this, so to kind of like lead into it. With the UI for me, I mean, I did have muscle memory at 2.79, so it did take me like a little bit to like get caught up. But I learned it very quickly, much quicker than I did the first time around on the UI. And using other 3D software, a lot of those other 3D softwares were designed like back in the day when people were like entering math to like make 3D, and those were the kind of people programming it before UI was even a focus. So when I've used a lot of other 3D UI, it's like the UI almost feels kind of like archaic and not very user friendly. And even though 2.8 was a complete redesign, because they're open source and because they have so many people just tossing stuff at it, I feel like they just have a lot more freedom to just rewrite everything if they want. And it's also one of the newer pieces of software, like when UI was still more of a focus. So honestly, the UI was so user-friendly focused and more modern that I learned it like really quickly. And I'm curious what BlenderBinge thinks, because I know he's deep in other 3D platforms.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, UI stands for user interface.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. UI, UX. Sorry. UX is user experience too. I don't know if I said that one. Sorry.
You get UX engineers, human factors. I think that the 2.8 upgrade was phenomenal, and for the reason that I had forced myself to learn 2.7 whatever. I can't remember where I think it was a 2.78 or something that I took a freelance job, and then they released 2.79, and it was awesome, but it had the right click select, and it had some things that were just, coming from, I had come from Maya and XSI. I'd used Lightwave, 3D Studio Max lightly, and it just it didn't feel right. I was like, what? Why? It's like Apple, like, think different. I'm like, well, don't think different. Like, think like how everything else works, so that production people can just jump in and use it, and it would explode. But it took a while. So when 2.8 came around, and I'm like, this is phenomenal, and they went left click select. I think I did a video, and everybody's like, all the like, the hardcore Blender guys are like, it doesn't really matter. No, it matters for people who are using other software, who want to use Blender but haven't, because they get really, really frustrated when they open it up and it doesn't work the way they're expecting to. And so when people started opening it up, and colleagues of mine, like I said, who used to laugh at Blender and it'd be like, why would you use that? All of a sudden they see cycles, and they see, Eevee, and they see that you can sculpt and all this stuff. And like, Autodesk has not really innovated for quite a while, in my opinion. Of course, this is just my opinion. And Blender has just gone off the rails with innovation. And you're like, people are just like, this is incredible. And so in the interface, in the UI, when you can actually just jump in, and it feels like Maya or like Max, or again, like nothing really feels like Houdini, but it feels normal. It's just phenomenal. Like for me, like ZBrush took me forever, because I'm like, what's a tool? Why is this thing called a tool? What am I doing? I don't understand. What is this? Why is this here? And it kind of felt like that with Blender for me. And then all of a sudden 2.8 comes along. I'm like, this is phenomenal. And it just felt right. And I'm like, this is like a free version of Maya, but it has like more innovation right now. And this is really cool. So that's kind of where, did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I mean, it did. It's just that, because I was curious from somebody who had many more years of experience with those, especially going back as far as you do in those applications. I was just curious. I don't want to like keep talking, but you did talk about the innovation. So can I talk about one of my favorite features that isn't getting talked about much? The grease pencil. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that 2.82 splash screen, I don't know how to pronounce, I believe it's a he. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but they have a link to his Instagram and his website, like, with it. And I was looking at his other artwork. He's incredible. His colors are just phenomenal. And like the layout, I mean, like if you look at it from like a geometry and an animation standpoint, like it's fairly simple, not in a bad way, but it's not as complex as it looks. It's just really well designed. It's just really pretty. I was playing around in that scene. I was like, this is awesome. But the grease pencil, so they added like a minor feature that not many people are talking about, but they actually they smoothed out the strokes, right? So the strokes smooth a bit better now, and they kind of draw from point to point better. And then the big thing is in the, so you have like a dope sheet that is like specifically for the grease pencil, and it displays your layers there and everything. They put all the layer controls on the layers. So if you've used the grease pencil, you usually had your layers and your keyframes down here. And then you had your drawing up here, and then over on the properties panel, you had to deal with like a material layer, a layer, and like an effects layer, and like a modify layer. So there was just a lot to keep up with, and they kind of condensed a lot of that. Like basically that whole layer panel over there has now been condensed into the dope sheets, so that like you can adjust like the opacity and like all those other things like right down there, and you can delete and add layers. And I think that like just that small UI tweak makes it so much less clunky to use and so much more streamlined. And I know that it was just used on I Lost My Body, that Oscar-winning film, and I know that like the guys who do Neon Genesis for Netflix, that anime studio, I know they picked it up. So I don't know if like they're kind of trickling over some of their development or feedback, but like the grease pencil is, aside from the fact that there's nothing else like it on the market, it's incredible that you can just go in 3D space and draw 3D on your computer. It's nuts. I think that's crazy. But also they just keep renovating the UI and doing these micro tweaks that, although they seem small, are like major improvements in terms of workflow. So I'm really excited to learn more of the grease pencil and keep playing with that.
It's getting easier and easier to convince my 2D drawing friends to go to Blender now.
Yeah,
because of this thing. Because most of them use like Procreate or Photoshop, and like this stuff is really well made and really good for the guys like that Photoshop and Procreate do not have. Like they don't have a 3D feature as far as I'm aware, and you can like draw something and make it a 3D line drawing. Yeah, that's super cool.
And it's so fast.
Even for just character concepting, it's not, you can make a concept character in 3D and it's line. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is so fast too, like just how quickly it performs in the viewport. And I know now they're adding lighting to it, and they keep adding more modifiers, and I think once they add lighting, that's going to be pretty big. But yeah, same thing with me. I work with someone he does like 2D animation, and he uses like Photoshop, Animate, Illustrator, and After Effects, like very much like classic 2D motion design package. And even he was like picking my brain, like because he was opening grease pencil and trying to get into it, because it's as BlenderBench was saying, it's truly innovative, and it doesn't get as much attention as some of the other features. But I think it's one of the most unique like pieces of software in the world for that particular package. But I've kind of like been talking most of this time, so I'm gonna sit back and let you guys take over. But I'm very excited about that feature.
It's funny, Southern, when I think about you at your studio, I just imagine you like in front of a screen, like showing all your friends Blender. That's the only thing I've ever imagined.
It's funny you say that, because my producer the other day, we were interviewing for like a 3D generalist position, and he described Blender as the small kid that won't shut up. In like the industry world, because it's kind of like for so long everybody's like, it's free, you know, and it's like it just like wouldn't stop nagging people, and like finally it got people's attention, you know, like the little kid at dinner that just won't stop pulling on your shirt until they get your attention. And I was just like, wow, that's like the perfect metaphor for Blender, because it's like I'm in it, and it's like if you use it, you preach it, because you know how great it is, you know. And you see people stumbling in other applications, and you're like, you know, Blender. They're like,
you become that guy.
Yeah, I know. I try not to be that guy, but it's just like, it's so great. And the developers are just so generous with their time and their knowledge. And I mean, like when you see them on their podcasts on the channel, they're all just they all seem so good natured about what they're doing, and you can tell they love it, and that just comes through in the program. It's definitely a program of passion, and you know, it's great. So yeah, it's hard not to preach it.
It'd be cool if we can all like go together to the Blender headquarters and just take a tour. That would be so cool.
I would love that.
That would be fun.
The BlenderNest guys.
They're really open for it. I mean, if we asked, they'd probably say yeah, because you're allowed to just, you know, turn up and say hello. I don't know if you watched the videos when they were introducing the new office, but they got some little traditions there as well, like bring a magnet or something when you go, because they'll stick it on like the front desk and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm curious if they even like know who we are, the guys over there.
I bet I have a feeling Ton probably like watches everyone. Like whenever anything Blender related is mentioned, he's probably watching it like obsessively.
I like him as a CEO because he's clearly passionate. I don't know if is he the CEO? Is that the right word?
I just call him the founder. I don't.
Kingpin.
Yeah.
Godfather.
I mean, I love how he's so like I emailed the Blender Foundation itself about an idea I had for the conference, and he emailed back Ton.
Yeah,
I was like, what? Like he is really really into the company, and I love it.
Yeah, I was asking him if I could do something like with their logo, because I wasn't sure under the logo stipulations if it was allowed or not. And he personally responded, and it was just like, oh wow. And then now I was talking to somebody else there, and they're just very nice people. There are I already think about how much they're giving back to the community. So the fact that they're willing to give back their time outside of all the time they've given is very, they just seem like good people. I mean, so
yeah, and the Suzanne Awards. Does Cinema 4D or like Maya have something like the Suzanne Awards? Because I'm not into those communities that much.
They do things.
Maya is such a huge community of just people who sit at their computers all day in studios, and I don't know how much these guys do outside of work, but it's such a huge. It's like I don't know that there's like this like rabid Maya community. I just think it's like the big dog on the block, and everybody uses it. So it's kind of like it's like Photoshop. Like you can go to Photoshop World, and you'll get like a lot of the evangelicals out there like preaching, the Photoshop stuff. But Maya's like a different. It's gone through so many owners, and it's just kind of been like the backbone of so many pipelines and studios that I don't know if there's like a big Maya hardcore like user group out there anymore. There was like when it started, but other software like Houdini is still pretty small, and it can do tremendous amounts of work with data, but it's still a relatively small community, so you'll find it there. But Max, Maya, not really, but Blender definitely has it in spades. I mean, it has it it's just wow. The community is awesome. Yeah,
everyone's so excited because this is still such a growing, developing thing, and there's so many young people using it. I don't think I've ever seen a community behind a program that's so excited to be using it. Like there's no big egos as far as I've seen about like Blender's better than everything. It's just like, hey guys, come check out Blender. Mm-hmm. It's just like join the club because it's awesome and we have free pizza. It's like, it's such a cool thing.
It's a very appreciative community because I'm pretty heavy into the Adobe applications, and I mean, anytime I like dive into the community to find out stuff there's just grumbles and complaining, because I think the thing with Blender is it's free, so it's kind of like you can't really complain,
Yeah.
But when you're paying so much money for a piece of software and no names, but if that piece of software crashes 10 times in one day after a new update, you're just like, what the heck? You're like, why is it doing it? And you go to Blender, and even if it does crash, it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's free. I can't, you know what I mean? Like,
No, and you just blame yourself, like, oh, I did. It was me.
Yeah. By this point, they have us so brainwashed. I'm like, oh no.
I shouldn't have done that. Although,
have you guys heard about their new? I keep talking too much. Have you guys heard about their new bug? How they're kind of going after the bugs in Blender? Have you guys heard about their new
their curfew?
No, I have not.
Yeah, I see Ton tweeting about that frequently.
Did you call it the tracker curfew or something like that?
I think so.
Somebody else want to talk about it since I've been a blabbermouth?
I don't know much about that, but can I just throw in a point previously about the differences between the communities? Brent Patterson did a really good talk at the Blender conference a couple of years ago, I think, called Don't Go Pro. And it was a really good one to listen to because he was talking about how Blender was really fun to teach to students. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because it sort of encourages a divergent culture. Because it's such a customizable software, anyone can take it and then change it to almost to look however they want, but like people will find different ways to access the same features and stuff. And that's something you can't really do in other softwares because it's like, okay, this is like the rigid version of the software. You need to change your mentality to get stuff going with this. But Blender is completely different because if you know how to, you can add whatever features you want. You can change it however you want, it's just completely customizable. So it encourages like other mentalities. It encourages creativity in a way. And I think that makes it more fun for people. Especially when like watching our YouTube videos, people will be able to flick through our tutorials and see how we use Blender in very different ways. I mean, especially with like my coding type stuff as well, because I noticed that I completely like disregard traditional uses for the interface, and then I start pulling up all these text windows and then laying them out and doing stuff like that, like in ways that I haven't really seen anyone else do. But I think that's part of the beauty of it and what makes it exciting, because people can go, oh yeah, that's possible as well, and I'm getting ideas, from looking at this, and it's just so unique for a piece of software that it's so changeable, and That's why I think I like working with it so much.
It is changeable. You can get access to the entire source bit code and rewrite whatever you want, and then share it, because I think that's the stipulation. But it's awesome. The only other group that I've seen, just to add in, I forgot to add in, there was a Lightwave community that was really, really strong. I think it's almost as strong as the Blender community, and it's been around for quite a long time. And that was another one that I'd forgotten about that was just phenomenal. Those guys were awesome. I used to go to Lightwave user group here in LA. They were just awesome. I did the one in New York too. They were really cool.
Nice.
Always a good group.
I just had this thought. So, there's Cycles and there's Eevee. And if you look at other programs, Cinema 4D, for example, there are like 5 different render engines that you can get for Cinema 4D to suit your needs. Do you guys see any other companies, like, do you guys see even like the potential for new render engines being developed for Blender, or do you think it's just going to be hammered down on Blender? I mean, hammered down on Cycles, hammered down on Eevee.
Yeah,
like, do you guys see that even being something that could happen?
Octane and Redshift are both working on Blender versions.
Does it Maxon own Redshift?
Yeah, but they're not stopping them from. So Redshift isn't like Redshift isn't only for Cinema 4D. It's most popular with Cinema 4D because usually you have, like, right now you have Cinema 4D and you have Maya are the 2 big ones. If you use Maya, you most likely use Arnold because Arnold comes with it. Arnold's what Disney uses, so it's a pretty buffed out render engine. But if you use Cinema 4D, you most likely use Octane or Redshift. Those are the most popular options, and they bought Redshift, but Redshift, they told Redshift that, like, they can still basically keep doing their own thing. So Redshift's developing for Blender now, and I believe Octane already released a Blender version, but I think it might have still been in beta. But
it's bad.
Yeah, it's
really bad.
They're both experimenting with it, and a lot of times when people download those other render engines, they think they're bad because they're used to Cycles being so integrated into just every piece of Blender. But, like, if you use other applications, which, like, Benj can attest to, a lot of those applications are almost like external. I mean, they're external pieces of software, like, tacked on to the software. So none of them match, like, the integration of, like, Blender and Cycles and Blender and Eevee. So if you're a Blender user and you're trying to use one, which I've tried, like, some other ones in there, it's like you almost just go back immediately because you just don't want to deal with the inconvenience of, like, the lack of integration.
I want to give Octane a go because it's a beautiful render engine. I just got to get past that learning curve for it.
Octane was awesome. They kept trying to beta test with us, and I couldn't bring external hardware at the time into my company. And their vice president at the time, I think he was a VP, kept calling me, and I kept having to tell him no, I can't do it. And I felt so bad about it. I'm like, I can't get this stuff in. I'm not allowed. Policy dictates that I cannot bring in extra hardware. And it just I was kind of upset at my company for missing out on that because Octane is phenomenal. But whatever, so be it.
I was going to say, I don't think any attention is going to be pulled away from Cycles and Eevee because it's sort of covering the basis of, well, the 2 main types of rendering engines. So you've got a rasterization engine and a path tracing engine. So that's covering all the grounds. That's like the in-house thing. So no matter what happens with, like, external softwares being integrated in some way, this will always be the fundamental complete ground coverage for Blender for the different render engine types. But also, I think they do know how to improve those engines already, because especially I think they know how to speed up Cycles, because you know about what's it called, e-Cycles or something. There's
e-Cycles, yeah.
I
bought that a while ago.
Yeah, that could just be added to Cycles, but there's reasons not to at the moment. But like, I think they've definitely got their mind on what they want to do next for the engines as well. But of course, it's just a matter of priorities. So there's a lot of stuff to add to Blender in all different fields.
I thought they'd announced that they were basically calling it like Cycles 2.0. Like I thought I had read somewhere that they were doing a major overhaul, that I thought they even talked about it at the conference a little bit. Am I wrong in that?
No, I don't know the time frames on this stuff, so I'll need to look that up.
Yeah.
What's e-Cycles?
You take it, Benj, because you've had more experience with it than me.
Yeah, it's a way of speeding up Cycles. It's a whole I don't know how to describe it, but the guy sold a training course, and actually like it wasn't an add-on, but it was a way to get into the software and actually, what it basically does in a nutshell is speeds up Cycles by a considerable margin.
Yeah, it's like 25-30%, isn't it?
It's pretty. Yeah, I used it on a freelance project, and it really helped. It shaved off a lot of time. I have to check because I don't think I saw an update yet for 2.82, but I have to check and see if it's coming. Because once I bought in, I think he's sending me the updates like every time there's a new version, but he has to actually code it himself. And not much changes, but
are there any downsides to using e-cycles, and what are they doing anything with that tech to actually implement it into Blender officially?
That I don't know. That's a good question because it is really cool.
Yeah, I can't really speak on their decision-making process. I've just heard about them talking about it a few times, but basically, someone is making money off e-cycles, and with the way like the GPL license works and stuff, and if there's any code changes, you can just take them and then add them. But just because you can doesn't mean you should necessarily, or you want to. Just for being friendly, or so you got to like weigh up a balance of considerations here. Because Blender is, a really friendly community and we are open at the end of the day. But I mean, it's entirely up to them how they want to proceed with extending current features. Just overall, what I'm saying is, there's the support for cycles and Eevee is definitely not going away. And there's still improvements that can be made on bringing those two engines closer together. It's beautiful how the shader system is pretty consistent across the Eevee and cycles, but there's always some room for improvement.
I know that part of it too is that they keep that like people don't realize how much they are improving cycles because everything else is changing. So like things in your viewport are naturally going to go slower. So like, now with look material, the material dev mode, that's more advanced than the texture mode was before, but that takes more processing power, and they've talked about like when they were first switching over to 2.80 and they were talking about all the things going on in the viewport, they'd gotten a tiny bit of pushback where people are like, well, isn't that just going to make it run slower? And they said, well, we've also done improvements on cycles. So like we did these things, and I don't remember the numbers, but it was like we did these things and it slowed it down 8%. But we did these improvements on cycles. So like it's now like 12% faster. So then it's like you get like a 4% boost. So it's like they're doing things to improve it, but because they're doing other things to improve other things, it kind of like they kind of negate each other a little bit. So people don't, I think, see as big of a difference there. But I mean, like, look at what they just did with 2.82 and the BVH loading times,
Sweet. Well, I think we can probably cap it here. This was a great episode. We were actually going to talk about something else on this, but we actually spent the whole time talking about 2.82, which is cool. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Support us on Patreon. Look out for that. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.